Hello, everyone, and welcome to our program this morning. It's called the Olympia Regional Master Plan Update. My name's Carla Wolfsberg, and together with John Cezanne, we are members of an Olympia Indivisible team called the Port of Olympia Action Team, and we are presenting this program today. Just before I introduce our speaker, Ronda Larson Kramer, I'd like to just mention a few things. And that is, we would like to also have a land acknowledgement here. We want to say that we are on the indigenous lands of the Nisqually, Puyallup, Squaxin Island, and Chehalis tribes. We thank them for having kept this land and its waters healthy and bountiful for more than 10,000 years and for continuing that work to this day. We acknowledge their sovereignty, both past and present, and we heed the call to preserve these shared lands and waters for generations to come. So thank you all for coming. Before Rhonda begins her presentation, I'd just like to mention that we will take questions at the very end of the program. All you need to do is go into the chat and direct your questions to the host, which is John Cezanne here, and he will read your questions to Rhonda. So right now, then I'll introduce our speaker. Ronda Larson Kramer is a local attorney and activist. You may have read about the community effort to save the Davis Meeker oak tree in Tumwater. Well, Ronda created that litigation to save that tree. And we'd like to hear from her now about the Olympia Regional Airport Master Plan update. Ronda.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. All right. The first slide is not advancing like it's supposed to. There we go. So I'm going to talk about the history of port districts, then I'm going to explain what a master plan update is. I'm going to discuss the contents of the Olympia Airport Master Plan update. I'm going to talk about problems with airports generally, noise, air pollution, why the Olympia Master Plan update isn't just conceptual, the port's flawed environmental review of the master plan update, a look at the master plan update's layout maps, the port's planned warehouses at the airport, the impacts of the master plan update on water resources and on protected species at the airport, prairie, and things that you can do. So back before Washington was a state, the Transcontinental Railroad was being built across the country, and all the cities were vying to be the terminus of that railroad, and that is because it would be a real economic boon to whatever city was chosen. And in order to entice the railroads to choose them, they gave their ports to the railroads. And that resulted in the railroads having a monopoly over the ports. And then the railroads didn't want to pay for upgrades to those ports because they were not interested in spending money that they didn't feel they had to. They were all competing against each other at the time. And so the growth kept happening, but the upgrades did not keep pace with the growth, and the ports started to buckle under the strain of the growth, and they became unsafe. So that enabled the legislature to finally have enough political willpower to overcome the lobbyists that the railroads had put out that was previously stopping any reform. And they were finally able to pass the 1911 Port District Act. At that time, communities, counties, and city governments were full of corruption. And so the legislators did not want to put ports under the control of cities or counties. And so instead, they made them independent governmental entities. And that was so that they would avoid being controlled by special interests. But because they're independent entities, they do lack checks and balances. They don't have a city to answer to or a county to answer to. And this pendulum has swung back. So now special interests dominate some Washington ports. There is a mentality often in ports of growth for growth's sake. Because ports are focused on economic development, they sometimes buy airports, and that is what happened in Olympia's case. That's where the airport master plan comes into play. The FAA requires an airport master plan to ensure that an airport can accommodate future aviation forecasts. The reason is safety. If you don't keep up with population demand, things can become unsafe. And because it's based on predictions of what's likely to happen in terms of aviation demand, airport master plans are all about meeting the likely future need. These documents are essentially forecasts. That's the opposite of merely conceptual. So don't listen to the port when it claims the plans are merely conceptual. And to the extent there's conceptual stuff in there, the port commissioners need to remove that stuff and leave only the basics. If there's only a small portion of the plan that is necessary to meet aviation forecasts, the rest is pork. Master plans are required to look at multiple alternative scenarios. This includes looking at a do-nothing scenario. The port is required to assess each scenario's ability to accommodate the forecast. The port is also required to assess environmental constraints and financial constraints. And then they are supposed to pick a preferred alternative. The preferred alternative is supposed to be based on a prediction, an aviation forecast on what is likely to happen in the future. The forecast is not a certainty, of course, but it is the most reasonable prediction based on available data. Before I get into the details, I wanted to talk about something that you should be aware of. The port calls the master plan update the 2021 master plan update, but that's kind of misleading. It should be called the 2025 master plan update. The update first was drafted in 2021, and the port is saying that this fact warrants calling it the 2021 update, even though that confuses people when they're looking for the documents online. The port also has said that because it's been worked on since 2021, the public can't have any more input. So calling it the 2021 plan seems to be a tactic to make us feel powerless to stop it. Now let's get into the plan details. The port predicts that aviation demand will increase by 1% per year at the Olympia Airport. If you look at all that the plan includes, it becomes clear that the port is shooting for something far exceeding its 1% growth prediction. We suspect it may be trying to become an air cargo distribution center. There's a huge market for that worldwide due to e-commerce, especially for goods coming from China. And this would explain why the port is so focused on building more warehouses here. The current runway doesn't allow large cargo planes, but our research indicates that there is a market for smaller cargo aircraft that could be the direction that the port is headed. On the other hand, the port very well could be planning to extend the runway even further in the future to accommodate large cargo planes. Whether or not this is realistic is kind of beside the point. The port has a history of boondoggles. If it aims for becoming an air cargo distribution center, whether or not that aim is realistic, it will end up adding a ton of new impervious surface and the damage will be done. Even if an actual increase in air traffic does not materialize, the damage will be done. So we're damned if they do and damned if they don't. Now let's look at what the plan includes. It calls for 610 parking spaces, 131 hangars, a 260,000 square foot aircraft loading and unloading area, 6 gates, 40,000 square foot de-icing pad, another helipad to accommodate more noisy helicopter traffic, a 40,000 square foot passenger terminal, taxiway changes to increase capacity, and a new turf runway, which could lead to a new paved runway in the future. Noise is considered one of the most detrimental environmental effects of aviation. Research indicates that it hurts children's cognitive skills. Research also indicates it increases the risk of hypertension, stroke, and heart disease, and it disturbs sleep. In addition to noise, airplanes create aircraft emissions. Aircraft emissions have been associated with increased respiratory problems, cardiovascular issues, and many other health concerns. Ultrafine particulate matter, or UFP, crosses the blood-brain barrier and affects the brain and also can enter the placenta. UFP from planes is elevated around airports and flight paths. It often drifts for miles, which most people aren't aware of. Emerging research, in fact, indicates that UFP is associated with serious neurological problems and poor health birth outcomes. The master plan update would lure even more jets, by the way, which emit substantial UFP. Many planes at the airport also emit lead due to leaded fuel, and this is a known public health concern, especially for children living around airports. The port often says that the proposals in the plan are just conceptual, so there's no need to worry. But Warren Hendrickson, the port's director of operations, wrote online that the master plan is charting a course for the airport for the next 10 years. And one need only look at the past to know that the port has every intention of carrying out these plans. In 1994, the port said that the airport wasn't planned for any changes. But when it said that, it had already paid a consultant to study airport expansion. It called this a market study. It wouldn't give a copy of that study to the public. And right after that, it forced out an entire neighborhood with buyouts and demolished the homes in preparation for extending the runway. And it ultimately extended the main runway by 40%. We know this from comparing before and after aerial maps. And the Swire lease was signed in 2022, which some of you may have heard about, and I will talk about this more later, but at this time I'll just say that there's nothing conceptual about a lease that has already been signed for development of 95 acres of airport land. That means 95 acres is already on the chopping block. It is prime gopher habitat and critical aquifer recharge area as well. And it is slated to become impervious surface. So that lease was in 2022. Then in 2023, the port told the Capital Little League that it had to find a new home. The league has played on 8 ball fields next to the airport for 25 years, and aerial maps show that the ball fields have existed there for at least 35 years. The port said that the land was needed for aeronautical activities in the near future. Actions speak louder than words, and the actions of the port show it has every intention of continuing the process of growing the airport substantially. I've heard from some people that they like this master plan update because they want to be able to take a flight from Olympia instead of having to drive to SeaTac. I think these people are uninformed about the health risks that airports create. You can't see, hear, or taste ultrafine particulate matter. You have no idea that you may get dementia in 30 years as a result. I live under a flight path, so I can hear the impacts of airport already, but if you don't live under a flight path, you may be unaware of what other people in this county are experiencing right now in terms of noise. Flights have actually increased significantly in the past 10 years. Let's say you do know about all these things and you still want the airport expansion so that you can avoid having to drive to SeaTac. First off, I want to say that you can just as easily drive to Angle Lake Light Rail Station in an hour north of here and enjoy free long-term parking at the station, and then take the light rail to the airport. That is a no-hassle way to fly. And it's just an hour, for heaven's sake. It's not fair to the rest of the community members that just because you want to save an hour drive, you're going to want something that will damage the health of thousands of innocent bystanders that have no control over the situation. We outlawed smoking indoors for a similar reason. The State Environmental Policy Act requires an in-depth review of a master plan update if significant environmental impacts are likely to occur. The port did a surface review only. It said it didn't need to do an in-depth review because it could do that later when individual projects are shovel-ready. But waiting until later leads to what's called piecemealing, and that's illegal. It's illegal because it will allow them to hide the cumulative impacts. When you're just evaluating impacts of one project, you don't talk about the impacts from all the projects in the master plan as a whole, and that makes it unlikely that those cumulative impacts are ever going to get addressed in any responsible way. Now let's get to some of the maps in the plan. Here's the layout plan for the port's preferred alternative. You can't read the fine print, but I'll just tell you that it really doesn't say anything helpful. It's just general information. You can't tell from this map where anything in the plan is likely to be built. The port splits up the maps in such a way that it's really difficult to get an overall picture of what's going where. No overall airport layout map gives details. Instead, you have to look at multiple maps that give details and then cobble them together in your mind. By the way, that's also the way the entire master plan update is organized on the website. There are no tables of contents. There are no chapter headings on the website. You have to click on each chapter to figure out what's in it. And you can't do word searches without opening every single chapter individually, one at a time. And it's perhaps done intentionally to prevent the public from being able to see it holistically, since that would reveal that this update is intended to grow the airport aggressively. On this map, you'll notice that I pointed out the Capital Little League field. I just did that so your eye has a reference point as I flip between maps. That red square is my own markup, which is relevant to the next slide. Okay, this is the red square from the prior slide. I'm not sure if you can read the fine print, but it has labels for specific items that would be built in specific locations. And that's great. Now we can know where the port thinks it will be putting a de-icing facility, for example, and we can figure out whether it's in the wellhead protection area for most of Tumwater's drinking water, which I will discuss in a few minutes. But you may also notice that this map seems to be part of a larger map. As I mentioned, that larger map with details isn't being shown to the public. So all we've got to work with are several maps of just portions of the larger map. The other maps that I have that have labels I've looked at, they mainly show plans for more hangars. I actually had to count them by hand, and I found 131 hangars. Nowhere in the narrative of the plan does it actually say that there are 131 new hangars planned. In this map, you may notice that there are labels for new gates for jets, air cargo facilities, commercial air service support, which is a bit unclear to me what that would be, vertiports, which would be for air taxis, and short-term and long-term parking, and a few other things. This is that same square, but without the markups from the port. This is what you see if you use Google Maps. I find it useful to show those two slides side by side so you can get a sense of how much impervious surface would be added. And by the way, that yellow polygon is not development, it's not impervious surface. It's the runway protection zone, and that means it needs to remain free of obstacles so that an aircraft will be okay if they overshoot the runway a bit. This is a zoomed out view of that same red square where all the impervious surface is planned, and this is just for perspective. And this is the same view, but the red square in this outlines the area subject to the Swire lease. It is 95 acres of mostly prairie with some forest land. If you're not familiar with the Swire lease, it was and is a highly controversial decision by the port in 2022. And ostensibly, it's for bottling Coca-Cola, but Swire is part of a larger Hong Kong company that also has an aviation arm. The lease is wide open as to what kind of activities would be done there, but the design concept diagrams show that it will be mostly impervious surface with a large warehouse. And this is in rich gopher and lark habitat. So if that 95 acres is all paved, that would be a significant loss for these species. By the way, no environmental review was done before they signed this 75-year lease. What I mean is nobody did an environmental assessment under SEPA, which is the Environmental Policy Act that requires environmental assessments to be done before a governmental entity makes any decision that's likely to cause significant environmental impacts. It's illegal to not do a SEPA review. This lease could lead to a lot of Tumwater's drinking water being bottled and shipped elsewhere. I think you should also know that this is supposed to be discussed and evaluated in the master plan, but it wasn't. The reason is that the port, for unknown reasons, decided not to update the 2021 master plan after the Swire lease was signed in 2022. This makes the master plan incomplete, and it also makes the environmental review of that master plan incomplete. There is no way commissioners should be approving a master plan with such a significant omission. And here is some more impervious surface coming soon. This red square is not part of the master plan update, but I wanted to talk about it because it's part of that overall push for more warehouses and impervious surface that suggests to us that the port is focused on becoming an air cargo distribution center. The port commissioners rubber stamped this on March 10th of this month. This will add another 50 acres of impervious surface at full build out, and this will lead to forest land and prairie being paved over. There had been a lot of time spent by the port and the city of Tumwater in the past to create plans for public use here, including preserving a grove of trees and making space for Capital Little League and creating one or more bike or pedestrian paths, rather than just 100% warehouse and parking lot. It's next to Bush Middle School, too. The port and Tumwater were working on an interlocal agreement for those community amenities. But ultimately, in late 2021 or early 2022, the port's executive director, the then executive director, not the current one, withdrew from the agreement and ignored all requests from Tumwater. And just 2 weeks ago, the port commissioners ratified this and made some statements that made it sound like they cared about Tumwater. But again, actions speak louder than words. Here's the design concept for Panettone. You can see that it's identical, even in color, to the new warehouses on 93rd and I-5. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about water. The water resource assessment done in the past by the Department of Ecology states that the airport is one of 3 major areas of groundwater input to the Deschutes River. This is due to numerous springs and seeps next to the airport that flush cool groundwater into the river. This helps maintain the viability of salmon runs. Research indicates that much of the precipitation at the airport soaks into the ground rather than flowing directly to streams. This area is classified as a critical aquifer recharge area extreme. That classification is the highest of 3 levels of critical aquifer recharge area and the most important to groundwater, drinking water, and salmon runs. So when the port staff told port commissioners on February 10th that the Panettone plan is good for the public because it would reduce runoff, that could not be further from the truth. There is no runoff now. When you cut down trees and pave over a pervious surface, that is when you have runoff. Most of Tumwater's drinking water comes from the Bush wellhead a mile west of the runway. The airport is within its wellhead protection area. This is an area where there is a risk of well water contamination from spills of chemicals. For example, this could happen if you have a de-icing facility for aircraft, because that uses harsh chemicals. Although de-icing facilities are constructed to prevent spills, an extreme weather event, poor maintenance, or wear and tear on equipment could result in a spill getting into the groundwater. Before I move to the next slide, I wanted to point out that the de-icing facility in the plan is just outside the dark blue 3-year time of travel zone and in the 5-year time of travel zone. So take my cursor here and show you. This is the area on the map where the de-icing facility is currently planned to go. And so just to explain what this means about time of travel zones, wellhead protection areas are divided into 6-month, 1-year, and 2-year, etc. time of travel zones. What that means is a raindrop landing in the 1-year time of travel zone should reach the well within 1 year. So in this case, if a severe weather event washes de-icing chemicals to the northwest, it could end up in the 3-year and 2-year time of travel zones for most of Tumwater's drinking water. This map shows the springs and seeps that make the airport area one of the major areas of groundwater input for the Deschutes River. And this is critical for salmon runs. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife considers the highest priority for the Deschutes Basin to be the maintenance of water quality at the mouth of the Deschutes River. The reasons are that it protects the sizable investment in fish production in that area. Maintenance of water quality is directly related to in-stream flows. And when I say in-stream flows, I just mean the amount of water flowing in that river. The Department of Ecology already deems the Deschutes River high risk in terms of lack of in-stream flows. Not only is it important to drinking water and river water, but the airport is also a functioning prairie. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife estimates there could be thousands of gophers living there. In fact, it is the Olympia pocket gopher's largest remaining contiguous quality habitat. These gophers are a threatened species under state law. The streaked-horned lark also uses the airport prairie as an important breeding site. These types of breeding sites are slowly disappearing around the state because of development. The lark is also a threatened species, like the gopher is. In October 2023, the City Council voted to keep secret their work on the document that is a prerequisite to development of the airport. That document is the Bush Prairie Habitat Conservation Plan. The port has stated that they do not plan to translocate, in other words, move the protected species. Instead, they plan to buy property elsewhere, then enhance it by clearing the Scotch broom and things like that. The future replacement property, by the way, may or may not already have gophers on it. That is not required. The key requirements under the Habitat Conservation Plan simply is that the replacement property must have the potential to support gophers. This means the species on the airport prairie will most likely get killed. And due to the nature of this subspecies of gopher, they would likely go extinct because they need large contiguous areas, and the airport is their last such place. I put this in here just to show you a cool app that you can use to track flight paths. And you can also find other information about what particular plane you see. These orange lines on here represent a single plane that kept circling over Olympia and Port Orchard and also Tacoma. And this was at 9 p.m. at night when I did this. The orange color indicates that it was at an altitude between 1,000 and 2,000 feet. And this takes a while to load when you're using this app. So just wait for it and then click on the screen, and eventually the all the planes in the sky will pop up. And then you can click on a particular plane and it will show then the path of that plane and also what type of plane it is. So what do we want to happen? We want the port commissioners to reject any version of the master plan that results in hundreds of acres of new impervious surface. This means we want them to reject a plan that has more development than is needed to meet the air traffic demand forecast of 1% per year. And we want staff to do an in-depth environmental review. The FAA's directions on master plans state, quote, if an early examination indicates that the principal alternatives are likely to have extensive environmental effects, it may be appropriate to develop additional alternatives. If there are no additional alternatives, the decision to move forward with the existing alternatives should be made only after careful consideration by the airport sponsor, in other words, the port. I read that to mean that if the planned development would have extensive environmental impacts, and you can't find any scenario of development where there won't be extensive environmental impacts, you should think about not doing the development. What can you do? Well, you can decide to run for port commissioner. We really would like you to. There are 2 vacant seats and another one that is occupied but up for a vote this year. The yellow, dark blue, and orange are on the ballot this year. Yellow and dark blue have no incumbent. Orange has Bob Ayal running to keep his seat. He is a development-focused commissioner, and he has said that he supports this current master plan update. The job of port commissioner takes 20 hours a month at a minimum. Commissioners get medical and dental benefits, and they also get $9,000 a year. Meetings are in the evenings, and so the position is meant to accommodate people with jobs. So please let me know if you or someone you know is interested in finding out more, and I can give you that information. What else can you do? Please sign the petition. To find the petition, Google Stop Olympia Airport Growth. The petition states, quote, "I oppose any plan to expand air traffic at the Olympia Regional Airport. Please protect our county's quality of life by voting against any such plan," unquote. Also, what you can do is come to the Port Commissioners meeting on Monday at 5:30. The address is 626 Columbia Street Northwest, Suite 1B in Olympia. And if you want, you can speak for 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes, but you do need to sign in at the beginning if you want to do that on the sign-up sheet just inside the door. Or you can just come and be present, which is also a help. We suggest that you indicate your opposition to the master plan update by bringing a small sign the size of a sheet of paper. Large signs aren't allowed, and you're not allowed to hold them up if it would block the view of the people behind you. By the way, the commissioners aren't voting on the master plan update on Monday because community members and the Black Hills Audubon Society filed an appeal of the inadequate environmental review on March 13th. But we are still asking that the community attend this meeting on Monday to demonstrate their opposition to the master plan update. Also, if you live in Tumwater, please reach out to the city council and let them know they need to pay more attention to their water resources. I'm not sure they're aware of all the things that I've told you about the water situation there. And please reach out to the port commissioners by email or in person or on phone and tell them that you don't want this particular master plan to be approved because it plans for way more development than is necessary based on aviation forecasts. Thanks for having me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And if you know of any groups you want to hear this slideshow, please contact me about that.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. And now we're going to open it up for questions from our audience. The best way to ask a question is simply to go into the chat, scroll down where you see host-John, that's John Cezanne here, and please type your question in the chat and then John will read it to Rhonda. So thank you so much, and thank you for your presentation, Rhonda. Now we'll just go into questions.
Oh, here comes one from Lisa Reiner. How can the public react when the port staff says that they have public outreach when there is no outreach?
How can the port can you read that again?
How can the public react when the port staff says that they have public outreach when there is no outreach?
That's a good question.
I'm wondering if she's referring to the open houses that the port has said that the airport has said they've had in the past. They've had 2 or 3 open houses. They were back in 2022. And they're sort of saying that they've done the public outreach part of it.
Right.
They've already completed that. I think maybe that's what the question might mean. So how do we really affect it now if they're not going to have any open houses?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that just doing these talks and signing the petition, and then going to the Port Commission meeting on Monday, is the best we can do, to try to make them see that we all still really care.
Okay.
And John, you had a question.
Yeah, my question was, what would it look like, to accommodate 1%? They say we have to accommodate 1% growth per year. What would a plan look like that would be kind of the minimal response to something that would accommodate 1%?
So they have to keep, for safety purposes, they have to keep up the pavement. They repave the runways and things like that. So that's a given. They're going to be doing things like that. If there's new technology that they need to install, they're going to be doing that. And then 1% growth, that's a good question. I don't know what that would look like. It certainly isn't going to be extending the runway because that's going to allow a lot more types of aircraft to come land, which is not really a 1% growth. That's a much higher. Anyone else have any? Carla?
Okay.
John?
Yeah, there's some more questions. Melinda's asking, I'm just asking where we will find the recording for this presentation so I can share it.
Um,
Carla, maybe you can answer
yeah,
that.
okay, so we are going to, and it started a little bit late, unfortunately, the recording. I thought it started at the beginning, but it didn't. So what we'll probably do is we'll have to do a little bit of editing on it, and we will ask the Olympia Indivisible Steering Committee if we might be able to put it on the Olympia Indivisible website. And that's, I think, how we might share it to begin with. And it will probably be uploaded to YouTube. And that's kind of how we plan to move forward on that. It may take a little while. So
I would also suggest that it will be on the website for Stop Olympia Airport Growth.
ah, good. Okay. So that's great.
And if you sign the petition, you will get an email that has a link to it as well.
Okay, we have a question from Pam. Who does Rhonda work for and why is she involved in evaluating the port's master plan?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. So I work for myself. I have an estate planning practice, an elder law practice, and I've actually set that aside to do some community activism. And why did I get involved? Because I own forest land a mile south of the airport. And I love it. And I go out there and that's my relaxation. It's my source of relaxation. And it certainly won't remain that way if the port is able to expand the airport the way it's trying to. So that's one of my main reasons. Another reason I got involved is because I don't like it when I see elected officials being or I should say staff of local governments being dishonest. And that's what I've seen. And that was the same reason I got involved in the Davis Meeker Oak fight, because I don't like it when people are lied to.
Okay, so where can people find the petition? Can you repeat that again?
If you Google Stop Olympia Airport Growth, the petition should pop up.
Okay.
I wonder if that's maybe a link we could put in the chat, Rhonda.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
You can keep asking questions while I do this.
Okay. Well, a lot of people appreciate what your presentation. I don't have any more specific questions. If you look in the chat now, I see Rhonda just put the connection for Stop Olympia Airport Growth Action. You just click on that if you haven't signed the petition already. And Carla says, I'm not clear what 1% growth means in relationship to airport activity. Does that mean 1% of the population will increase their use of the airport?
Yeah, it's based on population forecasts. So that's really the main driver is they're looking at population of the South Puget Sound region. And there's something else people should know about. Warren Hendrickson is the director of operations. He was the acting chair of the CAC, the Commercial Aviation Coordinating Commission, that was in charge of finding a new airport, if some of you remember that. And that commission was disbanded because the people rose up and said no. There was just way too much opposition to that. He is really the main driver. From what I can tell, he's really the main driver of the push for more aggressive growth. He flies here from Olalla. He does not live in Thurston County. He flies to his job here using the airport. So, I mean, it makes sense that he would like the airport to be expanded and isn't going to be affected by that. The other thing is they have a commercial, so that Commercial Aviation Coordinating Commission has been disbanded, but it was replaced by another entity called the Commercial Aviation Working Group, COG. And the legislature's requirements for COG are slightly different from what they were for CAC. In the new legislation for COG, they say that they're to look into expanding existing airports, but they're also supposed to look into alternatives to aviation expansion, aviation capacity expansion. What that says to me is light rail and high-speed rail and rail. Rail is the most environmentally friendly way to move people and goods. It uses so much less fuel than cars and airplanes. The problem is that the people on COG, none of them has any expertise in rail. None of them has any particular focus on rail. They're all airport, airport, airport. And so we don't anticipate that COG is going to be any more effective than CAC. And unless something changes. I mean, I wrote to my legislators, and I recommend that you all do that as well. Jessica Bateman, Beth Dolio, and Lisa Parsley. Write to them and say you want that fixed. You want COG to have representatives that represent rail. Otherwise, they're not carrying out their mandate from the legislature. And I actually made a public comment at the last COG meeting, and one of the members dismissed it and said that I was claiming that they aren't supposed to look at aviation. So you can see where that committee is going if they have someone responding to that comment in that way. See, I think, yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, so Warren Henderson and Alex told meeting in a port meeting that the Swire lease would be posted to the port website. He sent a message to me saying that it would not, because no one else had asked for it in the past 2 years. Is there a way to post the lease to a website?
Yeah, it's already posted. We've got it. We've got it posted. So it's in our appeal. I included it as an exhibit. So the exhibits, so the PDF for the appeal is bookmarked. So you figure out how to use, if you don't know how to use bookmarks for PDFs, that they're really handy. So figure out how to do that by just watching a short YouTube video. And then you can click through each exhibit as you're reading the appeal. And the appeal is posted in a couple places. You can go to Stop Olympia Airport Growth. And at the top, there's a tab for legal documents. It's posted there. I've also posted it to my website, upnotout.net, on the front page. And it's also posted at the very top of the petition. So you can get to it in very many places. And I don't remember which exhibit the Swire lease is, but it's in.
Okay. Yeah. Warren also, Sheldon asks also, Hendrickson has intentionally misrepresented the Swire lease to the public. Can he be held accountable?
Yeah, it's like trying to say holding people accountable. There's not really any way to do that other than we just keep using our voice and we keep saying things like that. And we keep speaking to the commissioners. The commissioners, what I see happen is they are busy people and they have jobs because this is a part-time position, being a port commissioner. And so they don't really have time to do a lot of the research. and they rely heavily on staff. And staff are nice people. I like them.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to, as a port commissioner, when you're being, you're interfacing with nice people, it's hard to distrust them and realize that they're not really necessarily giving you the straight information. So I see that as part of the problem. The other problem I see is that, and Carla has mentioned this, is that there's not really an interface between ports and public like there are between towns and counties. Like towns and counties, you have so many other things that you need as a citizen or a community member or a resident that you're interfacing with them with, like the court system and the your tax payments and property records. So you get to know your mayor and your council members much more than you would your port commissioners. And so there's kind of this, they're kind of hidden behind this lack of attention that the community has on that particular governmental entity.
Yeah, it's a big problem. Well, I have a question.
Sure.
Could you talk to a little bit about the future for air taxis and why that
Yeah.
would impact this effort?
Yeah. So one thing I've heard from some port commissioners is that they want to bring us into, they want to speed up the availability of electric aircraft.
Yeah.
And so that statement is problematic because on one hand, electric aircraft, fixed wing electric aircraft, is not even in the near future. Like there are so many obstacles to developing that technology. We're not there yet. It's going to be a long time. And so I say, if you want to get that sped up, wait to do a master plan update until it comes. We don't need to make a massive build out to get that here sooner. It's not going to help it get here sooner. It's going to be a long time anyway. That's one thing. And then the other thing is air taxis are not fixed wing aircraft and they don't need an airport. Air taxis are actually, one of the benefits is that they can have vertiports anywhere in the community, anywhere in the city that it makes sense. And their advantage is that they can avoid busy airports. Now, of course, if you have a busy airport and you're going to have a lot of people coming in, you're going to have Ubers there, you're going to have Lyft there, and you're going to have air taxis there. So they're just like any other taxi in that regard. So of course, they're going to come to the busy airport once it's already busy, but you're not going to do anything by putting them there in the first place from the ground up. Like right now, there's no reason to have a vertiport at the airport because we don't have the huge passenger traffic that the port staff seem to want. So when you're thinking air taxis, don't think airport expansion because that is not going to help us get air taxis. Air taxis are coming anyway, and they're going to come for many different reasons, and they're not going to be linked to airports. Another thing I just remembered I wanted to say earlier was in 2023, Warren Hendrickson was the director of the airport at that point. He wasn't the director of operations for the port overall. He was giving a talk to the Tumwater City Council, and he said that the forecast was to have 20,000 passengers at Olympia Airport per month coming through. 20,000. And so if we don't think they are interested in growth, to me, that statement right there signals where he's headed. And again, maybe it won't materialize, but they're still going to try because they do this. They have a pattern of trying things that end up not working out. And so by then all the gophers will have been killed because they will have paved everything over. And then you don't get the commercial traffic. I mean, remember we had commercial passenger service in the past, but it didn't work out. I mean, that was 20 years ago. We don't know if population growth maybe has changed the calculus so that it would be economically feasible for an airline to have passenger commercial air traffic here. But either way, we're damned if they do, we're damned if they don't. So
Did that have anything to do with the weather conditions here?
I think it might. I heard something about us being very foggy, but I may be wrong on that. I that is out of my area of expertise. So maybe
Hmm.
Carla, have you heard of anything about that?
No, I have not. Mm-mm.
Okay, so Carla, you had a question. Please explain why air taxis would not need a control tower and could be placed anywhere.
Because the vehicle is it's like a helicopter. It's like they look like drones that are just big. And so they've got a lot of control as far as they can just lift up vertically, go side to side. Um, so I really don't know the details of how a vertiport is going to work. They are going to have somebody there controlling things, but I don't know how that's going to interface with planes. But they don't need an airport air traffic control tower.
Okay. So from Mo, so do we know a railway group, and she has in parentheses, solutionary rail, question mark, that would take on preparing an alternate plan update that's more environmentally friendly?
Yeah, that's a good question. Unfortunately, the legislature doesn't seem to be focused on that at all. So I don't think well, there could be a group out there. I'm not aware of it. Um, One thing you just reminded me I wanted to say is Yakima has volunteered to be the another SeaTac, and that would be that would be doable if they were to use high-speed rail, and that would be a huge undertaking. But if we continue to just expand existing airports, the political willpower would not be there anytime soon to do that high-speed rail through the Cascade Mountains to Yakima. If, on the other hand, we all say no to expanding our smaller regional airports, that puts more and more pressure on the powers that be to have the political willpower to invest in doing that major infrastructure improvement to Yakima. And this is years out, but this is long-term planning that we're talking about.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, we have any more questions, or I think we're getting close to the end here. So we need to kind of wrap it up. Maybe we can take one more question, John, if there's someone in
I don't have any more questions. I have a comment from Joel. We
Oh,
should plan for high-speed rail to Olympia because that is our real environmental future for transportation. A Washington State bank or a national public bank could provide the funding.
That's
So,
great. Yeah, good point, Joel. Some people also might be interested in knowing that our appeal stopped the decision making on Monday. The port was going to make a decision on Monday as whether to adopt this plan or not. And under the port's procedures, which I think Carly, did you help put those procedures in place? Somebody did a while back. Community members were really responsible for getting very good SEPA procedures in place. And those say if there's going to be an appeal, if an appeal is filed, the decision making stops. And so that's not a given, right? It just depends on what's in the requirements or the procedures that a particular governmental entity has passed. And so we're very lucky in this case. The port has these really good SEPA procedures from citizen activism.
thank you so much for all of this information, and hopefully folks will show up at the Olympics room down at Percival Landing on Monday at 5:30. Bring a little 8.5 by 11 sign that says "Vote No MPU." That's all you have to have on the sign, and give that message to the port commissioners. They need to hear from the public that this is important to all of us, and we'll try to get this up on the website on either on the petition or the Olympia Indivisible website as soon as we can. So thank you all for coming. I'd like to end the meeting right now, and we really appreciate your attendance and all your questions. So thanks again, Rhonda, for your presentation. All righty. So saying goodbye to everyone. Bye-bye.